Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Earlier this week, Night Terrors over at DC Comics kicked off for their big summer event, and with it came a myriad of tie-ins. And in this video, we're going to go through each of them. There was 5 that came out this week, as well as the First Blood prequel issue. So we're going to look at the 5 tie-ins, and we're going to kick things off with Night Terrors Batman issue 1 by Joshua Williamson and Gilliam March. Batman is thrown into his greatest nightmare, the night his parents died, a piece of Bruce's history that everyone kind of knows about and one many writers have taken on, trying to bring some new aspects to it or try to have Bruce overcome that trauma wholesale. Williamson doesn't really do any of that, and yes, he does have Bruce confront it, but is quick to say that the character can't ever get over that, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't seem to find a way through it. From there, the book dives completely into Bruce's nightmare, where he's taken back to that night and assaulted by Insomnia and his monsters, who twist and warp the event further to try and break Bruce. I really like the idea that Williamson played with the fact that stuff like this has been done to death in Batman books, since every few years a villain comes to dredge up that crime alley trauma in Bruce in one way or another, and Bruce has hardened himself to it, as well as his familial traumas like Dick or Jason or Tim or Damian being killed and him implied to be responsible for it. It's all things that he's seen and dealt with before, so I like the idea that Batman doesn't get fazed by any of this at all. He knows it's a trick of the villain and one that's being tried to break him, and he's very well aware of it. Bruce's own darkness turning on him is another played out story that Williamson turns on its head, and Bruce, in particularly gory fashion, ends up giving birth to this strange red gun-headed bat creature. As Insomnia puts it, it's a symbol of his nightmares. As I said in my First Blood review earlier this week, the nightmare aspect will really give artists a chance to shine, and here Gilliam March does just that, conjuring up a really gross looking creature with a gun for a head alongside a demon Batman, Martha's pearl necklace rolling boulder traps, and a creepy new version of Insomnia clad in a Kid Robin costume. It's all just fantastic design work, and March's signature bold and gritty line work really give it some extra character. So Batman's battle with Insomnia is full of some pretty standard things for Batman to face while dealing with a villain who can get into his head, but Williamson saves an interesting twist for the end, which sees Bruce dive too deep into the nightmare and take on the role of Joe Chill the night his parents were killed, forcing him to gun down Thomas and Martha Wayne in Crime Alley. To my knowledge, I don't think something like this has been attempted or done before. I could be completely wrong, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Williamson does by exploring this new aspect of a rather overdone part of Batman's history. Batman isn't the only story, as Damian gets a little backup which picks up from the free comic book day issue of Night Terrors, where Damian had his own nightmare and survived it. So now he's off looking for a mystical shaman who specializes in dreams and sleep. The premise felt very much like something a young Bruce would do in his journey around the world to become Batman, become a better detective, and it shows Damian's growth as a character, following his father's footsteps and investigating a mystery, making him a real detective, and he learns about an impending threat and everything. Apart from there isn't really too much story, which does promise to be continued in Night Terrors issue 3 in a couple of weeks. David LaFuente's art looks pretty great and is quite suitable for a character like Damian, although being it follows on from such great body horror nightmare fuel in Gilliam March's art, I can't help but feel it doesn't really match the tone the overall event is giving off, which is a very horror-centric, very dark take, whereas this is just a little bit too cartoony, but it does fit Damian very well. Overall, Night Terrors Batman issue 1 was a great issue that really lent itself to the creative aspect of the event's premise, giving us some really awesome designs and page sequences while retreading some pretty overdone Batman tropes, but with an actual new and self-aware take. Next up, we're staying in Gotham with the Joker Night Terror tie-in by Matthew Rosenberg and Stefano Raphael, and this was by far probably my favourite one. So the issue explores Joker's worst nightmare, and you think with someone like the Joker it would be a pretty messed up and scarring event, but it's not. It's actually quite mundane, as the Joker's nightmare is where he ends up killing Batman. By accident, of course, and in doing so, leads him to find his life is missing its key component, leaving him to wander kind of aimlessly around Gotham, committing piracy, kidnappings, and murders, but nothing scratches that itch that would happen when he would throw down with the Dark Knight. This is where Rosenberg takes the book in some very fun territory, as the Joker ends up getting a day job at the Wayne Enterprises call center, leading to him to eventually go full postal on the company, microwaving his boss's head, and then threatening to blow himself and the building up, although all this just gets him promoted. The idea of Joker being aimless without Batman isn't a new concept, but I enjoy that Rosenberg approached it from a comedic point of view. It really seems as of late Joker keeps getting depicted as kind of a serious, gritty or edgy character, having lost that kind of clown prince of crime air he had to him. So getting that more funny Joker back, who can still be pretty dark and violent, is a welcome change. Stefano Raffaelle's artwork did a great job capturing all of the mundane detail of Joker's nightmare, placing it in a dark and dreary world devoid of any real colour, with everyone dressed in kind of greys and whites and dark navies, which really helps sell the uniformity that Joker hates so very much. Rosenberg and Raphael's Night Terrors Joker issue 1 was a hell of a lot of fun, and like the Batman one before it, it took an overdone trope with a character and ran with it, having a bit of fun with the tropes and letting the Joker return to his more psychotic clown roots. Poison Ivy is up next with a story by G. Willow Wilson, Atagun Ilhan, and Mark Morales. Pamela Isley's worst nightmares become real as she wakes up in a house straight out of Better Homes and Gardens with a very 1950s styled Harley Quinn wife and a way too neighborly Batman, Catwoman, Nightwing, and Penguin. I really enjoy getting to explore the multiple layers in Ivy's dream. She doesn't like this since this type of life is cut off from nature and is surrounded by man-made structures and material things, but Wilson also explores it a little bit further and takes the idea of the dream house and the dream everyone has, that, you know, that idealized version of a house in their life. And it's Ivy realizing that, well, sometimes they think they share the same dreams as the people they love. For the most part, you really don't, and you don't realize that until you're in said dream. Ivy also trying to make the dream work is really quite wholesome in a way. She can see that Harley is happy and she wants that for her, despite what others might think. Of course, this isn't an ideal dream though, it's a nightmare, and it slowly descends into madness when Janet from PR turns up and puts the world in jeopardy since she won't play by the rules. I thoroughly enjoyed just how utterly creepy the book got from there on out, and Ilhan and Morales' art conveys the uneasy creepiness so well, with a great Harley design that is really uneasy to look at thanks to the constant on the verge of snapping emotion she has on this face. Like, you could just tell, even though it's a still image, that her eyes are just twitching and just any moment she could just snap. And then from there they go full on crazy with characters just spewing a vile yellow liquid from their orifices and gaining giant smiles and warped eyes and faces. And it reminded me a lot of the intruders from the Mandela Catalogue ARG. They are copies of something familiar that we know, but their appearance is just that little off since they can't fully take on the form very well, and just little details are very dreamlike in that way. Night Terrors Poison Ivy issue 1 played with the nightmare concept really well and used its time to explore Harley and Ivy's relationship in an interesting way, while upping the creep factor of the event greatly with some fantastic and uneasy segments. Next, Ravager joins the Night Terrors in a story by Ed Brisson and Dexter Soy that explores Rose Wilson's childhood trauma and the things she truly is scared of. The book is set out almost like a monster movie slasher, with a young Rose being hunted by these creepy skeleton monsters meant to represent parts of her trauma through a very evil dead log cabin and a city. Ed introduces Ravager into the events by having the masked assassin act as a protector to the young Rose, kind of signaling and implying that the young girl has created Ravager as a persona in a way to help her deal with the childhood trauma she suffered at the hands of her parents, father, and various other things. Ed presents it in a really interesting way too, with the older Rose finding her and the younger Rose's past are quite muddled and mixed up, and she can't really remember what happened, almost like she's trying to repress her memories of the past thanks to what happened to her. The villain of the issue, which Rose calls the Murder Man, is interesting since obviously it's meant to stand in for Slade and every other horrible man who has hurt or abused Rose in some way, and Ed takes it a little further by having the character actually want to get out of the nightmare realm and away from the control of insomnia, something which none of the other threats in the tie-ins have done as of yet, which makes the villain even more threatening since he wants to use Ravager as a bridge to get out of the realm and into the real world. A surprising aspect of the issue was the inclusion of Stormwatch, which Ravager Ravager is now part of, and a story that's being told over in the Brave and the Bold anthology series. A story tie-in that I didn't see coming, especially since the canonical nature of those anthology books is always up in the air. Some aren't canon, some are very clearly canon, but obviously Stormwatch is now canon, and I thought that was a neat little story bridge. Dexter Soy's detailed and gritty artwork did a great job capturing Rose's messed up nightmare, filling it with loads of violence and really simple yet cool looking monsters that really play into Soy's artistic strengths, since he really does a great job when it comes to drawing skeletal structures and skulls and skeletons, making them look extra creepy with these really small beady red eyes that almost give them a sort of calm look, like there's just nothing there to like sort of register what emotion is going through these monsters' faces, and the eyes are just so uneasy to look at. Night Terror's Ravager issue 1 skillfully explored Rose Wilson's deep childhood wounds through some great horror visuals and tight story structure, making it probably the easiest of the tie-ins to digest, and the only one so far with a villain who has motives outside of scaring the titular hero or villain for insomnia. The final Night Terrors tie-in for the week is Black Adam, written and illustrated by Jeremy Hahn. So this issue obviously takes place after the Chris Priest run, as Adam is back to his youthful self and thrust into a Hellworld version of Kahndaq, which is made up from all the different places Adam has seen or been to across his long life, which gives the city a sort of maze-like cobbled together feel, almost like you have when you are dreaming, when things aren't really what they seem and they seem familiar, but they're made up of all different types of things you've seen in your real life. And I like that they were able to capture that in the pages. I thought that was really quite a cool visual. On top of that and some cloaked monsters that are hunting Adam, Teth loses his powers and his nightmare begins to properly reveal itself, and it is a world without his family, or one where they are brutally killed, which they are indeed by Yerd the Unknown, a character I really was surprised to see make a return, let alone in such a gruesome fashion. What Jeremy is able to get away with in the book in terms of violence is quite surprising. Like, we literally see a page where Cyrus gets bitten in half and thrown at Adam, and then Isis is just eaten whole by the Crocodile Man. It was utterly brutal, and I'm shocked that it was allowed to go on for as long as it did, let alone what we were able to see of it. Apart from that, this is really kind of the weakest of the tie-ins. Much like Adam, we are constantly left wondering what the hell is going on, especially with the other tie-ins doing a great job setting everything out and having an idea of where the story is headed in the next issue. This one just ends with Batman seemingly appearing in Adam's dream and wanting to help him, meaning this is obviously set after Batman's own tie-in finishing, or something is happening where it's not really Batman. Maybe it's Boston Brand again portraying Batman in this dream world. Again, nothing's really ever explained, it just kind of dropped into us. It was rather fast and loose with the event's continuity because of that, but Jeremy also taking on the art does mean the book looks fantastic. He's got a very solid style that works really well with Black Adam, especially this newer youthful version of the character. Also, I'm fairly certain the giant stone head we see in one of the pages near the beginning is a reference to the 1974 Sean Connery film Zardos, which I more than welcome. I think the world needs more Zardos references. Night Terror's Black Adam issue 1 was a mixed bag. The horror elements are all there in the writing and awesome artwork, but the meat of the story feels lacking, and the rules of the nightmare weren't as clearly defined as they were in the other tie-ins. So that was week 1 of Night Terrors done, and so far the stories have all been pretty good, if a little derivative of things we've seen with these characters before. I am glad I was right though, with the overall Night Terrors premise being a creative outlet for the artists, since each issue had fantastic monster designs and nightmare concepts, and hopefully this can continue into next week and so on. If you read any of the tie-ins, tell me in the comments section what was your favorite and why, and if you want to check out some more of my content, why not stick around and check out Night Terror's First Blood issue 1 or The Adventures of Superman John Kent issue 5. Again, thank you so much for watching.